The night was unnervingly still, as though the world had paused just long enough for me to notice. Clouds smothered the sky, and the moon's absence turned the streets into shadowy veins that twisted toward nowhere. The town I had moved to just weeks ago felt ancient, not in the way of cobblestone streets or Gothic cathedrals, but in the way a forest feels ancient, unknowable, alive, and quietly hostile. It was a little past midnight when I heard it, a soft melodic hum carried on the night air. I froze mid-step, unsure if the sound had come from within me or somewhere farther off. My breath billowed in the cold, and for a moment, I was suspended in time, the hum wrapping around me like a silken thread. I turned toward its source, a faint glow in the distance, barely perceptible through the fog. My heart beat a little faster. The glow came from the direction of the Grand Orpheum, the derelict theater everyone in town avoided. Its reputation was whispered rather than explained, with stories hinting at accidents, disappearances, and a singer whose tragic death had sealed the building's fate. Every rational thought urged me to go home, to lock my door and bury myself under the safety of my blankets. But there was a pull I couldn't resist, as if the hum was tailored to my soul, a siren call for which I lacked the strength to say no. My feet carried me forward, each step crunching on loose gravel and broken glass. The Grand Orpheum rose from the fog like a mausoleum, its facade cracked and weathered, the marquee's letters long since fallen. The building was draped in darkness except for a faint bluish light spilling from one of the broken windows. I hesitated, my hand brushing against the cold iron gate. For a moment the hum ceased, and the night became suffocatingly silent. Then it began again, this time clearer, almost beckoning. I pushed the gate open. It groaned in protest, the sound too loud in the oppressive quiet. The air felt heavier here, and the smell of mildew and rotting wood invaded my senses. My fingers trembled as I pushed the front door. It gave way easily, opening into a yawning darkness. Inside, my flashlight pierced through the dust-choked air. The grandeur of the theater was long gone, but remnants of its former glory lingered. Gilded moldings tarnished to dull bronze, velvet drapes in tatters, and chandeliers that hung like skeletal remains. My light skimmed over rows of decaying seats, their once rich fabric now a graveyard of moths and mildew. The hum grew louder as I stepped further in, no longer an echo but a tangible presence that seemed to vibrate within me. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, filling the empty spaces with an eerie vitality. I reached the stage, its wooden planks groaning under my weight. Then I saw them, faint, glowing footprints. They led backstage, their illumination dim but distinct, like the trail of a ghostly dancer. I followed the glowing footprints despite every warning instinct clawing at the edges of my mind. Each step felt like walking deeper into a dream, one of those nightmares where you know you should wake up but can't. Backstage was an unsettling labyrinth of old props, shattered mirrors, and sagging ropes that dangled like nooses from the rigging above. The hum became a melody, its notes so mournful they tugged at some primal part of me. It was beautiful, but it wasn't human. Not entirely. As I passed a row of mirrors, I noticed something strange. My reflection lingered half a second too long after I moved. I stopped to test it, waving a hand. The image mimicked me, but delayed, its eyes too dark, its expression too knowing. My stomach churned. I pressed forward, pretending I hadn't seen it. The glowing footprints ended abruptly at a door. A dressing room. The peeling brass plaque above read, Amelia Crosswell. My heart skipped. Her name was etched into the town's lore. The soprano whose voice had enchanted thousands before her untimely death during her final aria at the Grand Orpheum. I turned the handle, the door swinging open with a groan. The air was colder inside, and the smell of lavender, faint and sweet, tickled my nose. A vanity table stood at the center of the room, its mirror cracked like a spider web. Beneath the splinters of glass, I thought I saw movement. But when I looked closer, it was just my reflection, or so I told myself. On the table lay a faded playbill. I picked it up gingerly, reading the title, The Eternal Aria. My thumb grazed an inscription in faint ink. Finish the song and free me. The humming grew deafening, enveloping me like a swarm. I spun around and there she was, a figure standing in the doorway. She was barely there, her form translucent and flickering like a dying light. Her face was eerily perfect, framed by hair that billowed as though underwater. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Just the hum, as if her voice no longer belonged to her. Her eyes locked onto mine, imploring, accusing, begging. I stumbled backward, my hand knocking the playbill to the floor. The figure didn't move, but her reflection in the cracked mirror did. It stepped closer and closer until it pressed against the glass, its hands splayed as though trying to break through. The light flickered, the hum splintered into discordant shrieks, and the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. My breath hitched as the room trembled. The mirror on the vanity crackled ominously, its surface rippling like disturbed water. The ghostly figure lingered in the doorway, her face unreadable. But it was her reflection that moved, a mimicry untethered from reality, pressing its palms against the glass with unnatural intent. What do you want?" I stammered, my voice barely audible above the escalating hum. She tilted her head, and her reflection in the mirror began mouthing words I couldn't hear. Her translucent form remained still, almost serene, while her mirrored self contorted violently, her lips stretching wide in a silent scream. The cracked glass began to bleed light, jagged beams slicing across the dark room. Instinct screamed at me to flee, but the door behind her wouldn't budge no matter how hard I pushed. The figure raised her hand, gesturing toward the playbill I had dropped. It slid across the floor as though moved by an invisible hand, coming to rest at my feet. I bent to pick it up, the hum vibrating through my chest as I lifted the fragile paper. The notes scrawled across the sheet felt alive, their lines and curves writhing like worms. My hands trembled as I realized the symbols had changed, spelling out lyrics beneath the music. "Sing," a voice whispered, not aloud, but directly into my mind. I froze. The woman's reflection began pounding against the glass, her silent fury building into something almost tangible. Cracks spread like veins, and each shatter reverberated through the air. "No," I muttered. "I can't." Her reflection's eyes narrowed. The glass exploded, shards hovering mid-air like the teeth of a hungry beast. The ghost in the doorway finally moved, her form gliding toward me with the grace of a predator. Her mouth began to open, too wide, the edges of her lips tearing into an unnatural grin. Panicking, I stumbled back and cried out the first notes of the aria. My voice was shaky, the tune foreign and unnatural, but the shards of glass fell to the floor as if appeased. The ghost stopped, her head tilting again. Her reflection reassembled itself in the shards scattered across the room, watching me with a predatory patience. "I don't understand," I whispered, clutching the playbill like a lifeline. "What do you want me to do?" The door behind her creaked open, revealing not the hallway I'd come from, but a sprawling darkness speckled with faint, flickering lights. The ghost extended a hand toward the void, beckoning me forward. I hesitated, every fiber of my being urging me to stay put. But the room was closing in, the walls bending unnaturally as if trying to crush me. With no other choice, I stepped into the darkness. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. It was thick, suffocating, like walking through molasses. The flickering lights in the distance grew brighter, and I realized they weren't lights at all. They were eyes. Hundreds of them, glowing faintly and blinking in slow, unearthly rhythm. The hum surrounded me again, stronger now, an orchestra of dissonant voices swelling in my ears. Ahead, a faint stage emerged, its spotlight focused on a single figure, the ghost of Amelia Crosswell. She stood center stage, her pale hands folded delicately at her waist, her face a mask of sorrow. I stepped closer, the playbill gripped tightly in my hand. As I ascended the steps to the stage, the ghost's lips began to move. The hum turned into words, spilling from her mouth in a language I couldn't understand. The eyes in the darkness pulsed with every syllable, their light flaring and dimming like a grotesque heartbeat. She gestured toward the playbill, her eyes meeting mine with an expression that could only be described as pleading. My own lips began to move unbidden, forming the words on the page. The first note left my throat shakily, but as I continued, the melody took on a life of its own. The air vibrated with energy, the shadows rippling as though reacting to the song. The eyes in the void closed one by one, disappearing into the dark. The ghost's voice joined mine, harmonizing in a way that sent shivers through my entire body. Her translucent form grew brighter with each note, her mournful expression softening into something almost peaceful. But then the shadows began to move. Shapes emerged from the darkness, humanoid but wrong. Their limbs were too long, their heads lolling unnaturally on their necks. They crawled toward the stage, their movements disjointed and frantic. The hum returned, no longer melodic but agonized, a chorus of pain that threatened to drown out my voice. The ghost's eyes widened, her song faltering. She reached toward me, her hand passing through mine as though urging me to continue. I sang louder, pouring every ounce of strength into the area. The shadows recoiled, writhing like worms beneath a flame. The final note hung in the air, a piercing, crystalline sound that seemed to split the void. The crawling shapes let out an ear-splitting wail before disintegrating into black smoke. The ghost of Amelia Crosswell turned to face me fully, her body glowing so brightly I had to shield my eyes. Then, she was gone. The stage dissolved beneath me, and I found myself on the theater steps, clutching the playbill. The hum was gone, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. But something was wrong. The playbill in my hands was blank, except for a single, fresh inscription. You're next. The moment the last remnants of the ghost's glowing form faded, the eerie calm that followed felt suffocating. I stood frozen, the remnants of the aria still echoing in my mind like an unresolved chord, a dissonance I couldn't shake. My hands trembled as I glanced down at the playbill, now entirely blank except for that final, chilling inscription. You're next. I stumbled backward, the ground feeling suddenly unsteady beneath my feet, as if the very earth itself had shifted. The theater around me, once a crumbling ruin, was now eerily still. The fog that had once shrouded the building had thickened, now pressing against the cracked windows like a living entity, suffocating any remaining light from the moon. The darkness seemed to hum with a silent, oppressive force. A low sound came from the center of the stage. It was faint at first, just the softest tremor, like a whispering breeze against a distant door. But it grew louder, more insistent, until I realized it was the hum again, the same one that had drawn me here. But this time, it wasn't soothing or melodic. This time, it was hungry, vibrating with an undercurrent of malice. I turned, my pulse quickening, as the shadows in the corners of the theater seemed to writhe. The walls creaked and groaned, as if the building itself were awakening. I wasn't alone. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, oppressive. Behind me, the theater seats seemed to shift in the dim light, as though invisible figures filled them, waiting for something, waiting for me. The hum came again, louder now, and from the wings of the stage I saw her, Amelia's ghost, reappearing in the same spot where she had vanished. But this time, she wasn't the ethereal being I had faced earlier. Her form flickered violently, her translucent body distorted by what looked like a shadowy crack that ran down the middle of her face. She opened her mouth again, but this time no sound came out, only an abyssal silence. I could feel it in my chest, the weight of something about to break free. The shadows around her seemed to twist in time with her unspoken words. Without warning, the temperature plummeted, and the theater lights sputtered and went out. The darkness swallowed everything. The hum was no longer distant. It was now inside me, vibrating through my bones, forcing my heart to race. Then came the voice, a whisper, but too clear, too intimate, as if it came from the very air around me. You must finish the song. I froze, my body unwilling to move, yet my throat was aching with the need to sing. I clenched my hands into fists, fighting the pull, but the hum, a cold, irresistible force, began to seep into my thoughts, into my very soul. My lips parted against my will. I didn't want to. I couldn't, but the words came anyway. The haunting aria I had sung before, now twisted with a desperation I couldn't ignore. Finish the song, and you will be free.